For me, I don't feel good about myself unless I'm weight training. It's a thing. I've tried to change it. I've tried to shift it. I've tried to pretend it is. It is. It just is, and I'm not going to change it. And I honestly think there's some empowering truth to certain things about you uncover. You don't necessarily change. They're never going to change.
Conscious couples, business partners, and singles committed to attracting their dream partner. Welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and combined relationship expertise to help you create and consistently cultivate the most magnificent, intimate relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching conscious couples and individuals all over the world, as well as starting and growing a global business together, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to the one and only Conscious Couples podcast. Today we have a very unique episode. Episode number 138, a male's perspective on being in a growth relationship. Before we jump into this episode, as always, we want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Next Level Podcast Solutions for producing this show and I think around 50 others. Personal growth, personal development, self-improvement, mental health, all of the awareness is proliferating thanks to Next Level Podcast Solutions. If you want to start, grow, scale, or monetize a podcast, reach out to Emilia or I. We will put you in touch with my business partner, Kevin, who runs that part of the business. Yeah. As always, my love, what is your intention, ladies first, for today's episode?
My intention for this episode, I'm super excited for this one, is to help the women in our community. We've had a wonderful turnout of so many growth-oriented women coming to us and saying, SOS, help me. And to help them, help their partners really build a bridge to growth together. And so my personal goal is that you can speak a voice into this podcast episode, not only for the women who are growth oriented, but also really help to have the men that listen to this episode feel as though that they can build a bridge with the women that are growth oriented in their relationship.
Okay, so this is going to be a little different. Emilia is going to be interviewing me, and we talked about our next episode being me interviewing her. Oh. On a similar topic. So it'll be a male's perspective on being in a growth relationship and a female's perspective on being in a growth relationship. And I don't know if that's going to be the title, but Here we go. So I just want to give a little context first.
Sure.
Okay. So I'm speaking from a lot of experience for a couple reasons, just to provide context. Number one, I didn't meet Emilia until I was nearly 30 years old. Mm-hmm. And I basically failed forward and tried to make relationships work until I met Emilia. The best way that I can describe my past relationships, always heterosexual, where I used to go over here to try to make it work and then come back over here and be on my mission, my goals and my dreams, and then come over here and try to make it work and then come over here and be back on my mission, goals and dreams. And it wasn't until I met Emilia where it felt like it already works, just don't F it up. And so that's one point of context. The second point of context is I've been coaching for 7 years. I did fitness coaching, I did mindset coaching, I did life coaching, I did peak performance coaching, I did business consulting, and I eventually landed on business coaching. And I've been coaching primarily women. Our listeners at Next Level University are 80% women. Mm-hmm. So I've been coaching women for really 9 years now because I was sort of mentoring before coaching. Mm-hmm. And so for 9 years, I've been getting to know these incredible women from all over the world, all different countries, all different industries, all different backgrounds. And a lot of times they had what I call a green, yellow, red relationship. So I can think of one past client from Australia where I had to sit her down and I said, your goals and dreams, you're growth oriented, you have big goals and dreams. And I said, from my honest perspective, I've been coaching you for 8 months now. It is impossible for you to achieve your goals and dreams with this partner. This partner is a man who is toxic, who wants to see you lose. He doesn't, maybe consciously he says he wants to see you win, but his subconscious and unconscious is so insecure, he's doing everything he can to sabotage you. And I said, you're not going to be able to, from my honest perspective, achieve your goals and dreams and your growth without leaving him. Fast forward, he ended up doing something unbelievably over the top toxic, and then she ended up leaving him, and now she's been flourishing ever since. So I've seen, and then there's other people I coach, women, where it's very clear that their partner is not holding them back. And so, trigger warning in advance on this one, I'm going to be very truthful with what I've witnessed, and whatever Emilia asks me, I will just tell you the candid, accurate truth of what I believe to be, accurate.
And for the context on my end, ironically, I actually coach a lot of men. They avoid Alan, come to me. Women avoid me, come to Alan.
Yes.
So we have this beautiful experience of exchanging the behind the scenes.
We call it triangulation.
Triangulation, obviously. And so I have the behind the scenes of a lot of men who are successful, but not necessarily in a successful relationship. And you often have said to me, I want to be successful and in love. Those two come hand in hand. And so success came easy for you. There's a quote that you have said many a time. Love and or a really beautiful, flourishing relationship while also in success was not as easy for you.
Correct.
So I find this more often than not with men, because a lot of men don't know how to do both. And if they do know how, they certainly are struggle bus city to make sure that both of them are balanced. And when it comes to women, I personally am slightly biased. Women are awesome. They do try to do both, but they struggle more in the success arena than they do in the relationship arena. So my first question to you actually has to be around cognitive dissonance. The concept of when you think you know something, but the reality is quite far off. And why I mentioned this to start our interview is because what I have seen is men will more often than not think that things are going really well in their relationship, especially in a growth-oriented relationship. Women will come in and actually come with a gut punch, for lack of better words, and say, actually, the relationship isn't that great. So if the guys are thinking that it's a level 10 out of 10 relationship, everything's great, everything's gravy, my life is awesome, the women that they're in a relationship with often think about it as like a 5. It's actually not that great. I wish it could be better in this arena, this arena, this arena. What, from your perspective and your experience when it comes to men, is the biggest issue that men experience with this cognitive dissonance? What gets in the way of that? And specifically, how have you built a bridge to align both the reality and your perspective?
This goes all the way back to the roots of what gets enculturated early on. And I've been saying this for 9 years. Since I was 26 years old, I got in a tough car accident that really helped me sort of face all of my inner stuff.
Yeah.
And I used to say this for so many years, and I don't know if it landed. I think it will here. Women are encouraged to have a diary growing up. Everyone knows that quote that women mature faster than men. I think one of the reasons is because women are enculturated and encouraged to look within. They're encouraged to have a therapist. They're encouraged to have a diary. They're encouraged to journal. They're encouraged to be vulnerable. They're encouraged to express their true feelings. And it wasn't until after my car accident at 26 when I read a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by a woman named Bronnie Ware. I interviewed her 4 years later, but I have a flashcard in my pocket. Typically, it's in my office. It's all tattered and nasty. I've had it since 2018. But one of the top 5 regrets of the dying is I wish I had the courage to express my true feelings. So and we've talked about this in the past, is the short answer is a lack of humility, a lack of courage, a lack of vulnerability. The deeper root underneath why there's a lack of humility, courage, and vulnerability is the inability to self-assess. I've noticed men have a really hard time. I think everyone has a hard time with this, but I think men in particular have a harder time, statistically speaking, with looking inward. I coach mostly women, and I think the reason why, I will say this, and I'm just going to come flat out with it. Women are statistically more humble. It's just clear. Is that because they are less insecure, or is it because of culture? I think probably a little bit of both. They are more encouraged to look inward. They self-reflect more. And not all women. Definitely. Holy crap, not all women. But most women, statistically speaking, self-reflect more, whereas a man is more fearful of looking incompetent to others. One of the deepest fears in a man, that's conditioned in a man growing up, is never let them see you sweat, never let them see you be dumb, don't ask a dumb question, all that stuff. I never really had a lot of that, and that's why I'm going to reference mostly my clients and or men and women, but also my clients' partners in this, because for me, I've always been very different. I had a father who passed away at 2, stepfather who left at 14, who was the quote-unquote man's man, never let him see you sweat. The only time he ever cried was at his own mother's funeral. Yeah. And he was the hunter-fisher gatherer, fix all the engines, but I never once saw any vulnerability whatsoever or any self-reflection whatsoever from this guy. And so I ran in the other direction because I didn't like him. And so I feel like because I was raised by my mom and my older sister, I'm very different in this. Yeah. And so I'm going to not use me as an example. But what I will say is that after 26, I went all in 360 self-review, 24/7, 365, self-reflection. So the last part of this is I think men are taught to go out into the world and achieve and to bring home the kill, for lack of better phrasing, from a evolutionary perspective and from a cultural perspective. War, hunt, fish, gather, and then bring it back. So I think they're very externally driven, and they can achieve and they can improve in external direction, but they very, 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 very much struggle with self-reflection, which I think is what women actually crave, is a depth of a relationship that's emotionally open and expressive. And I think that unfortunately, one more piece of this is when a woman is immature, what I've noticed is that she does go for the brawn until she realizes that's a terrible idea. And so a lot of times when you're younger, I was a prepubescent little boy who didn't hit puberty until hopefully next year. And so when I was around those men who were badasses, quote unquote, they got all the women. So we think that women want these shallow, mysterious, don't let them see you sweat, perfect men, when in reality, that's the dumbest thing ever. And I'm what's known as a tryhard, which is someone who doesn't mind taking a cred hit. Most men think if you have to try hard, you're a loser. I think if you don't try hard, you're a loser. And to me, there's nothing more important than self-reflecting, saying I suck and getting better. And I think men really struggle with that suck part. Like they want to believe they're great, and that's why they never will be.
Right. That's that cognitive dissonance standpoint. Really appreciate that, love. So second question for you. If you were to describe what it's like as a man in a growth-oriented relationship, this growth-oriented relationship, how different is that than a non-growth-oriented relationship and or your experience in a fixed mindset type of relationship? And what has been the value of the growth-oriented relationship in contrast?
Well, the first thing to understand, and for all the women that are listening, if you do have if you are heterosexual and you have a male counterpart, please send them this episode, because I'm going to speak directly to them. If you struggle with self-belief deep down and you actually do have a lot of self-doubt, I think what you really need is the humility to admit that, and the courage to admit that, and the vulnerability to admit that. And I think that if you look at what society wants from a man, a hero in a movie, it's someone who storms the beach of Troy as a perfect specimen, Brad Pitt, right? When in reality, and when I was a kid, I used to resonate a lot with Achilles from Troy, and now I realize I resonate much more with Hector, and we've talked about that. He's a much more virtuous, holistic, emotionally connected man, whereas in that film, Brad Pitt, while he's quote-unquote awesome, he's not emotionally available until the end, and that's the whole thing. But ultimately, for the men out there, I think that there's an admittance factor that has to happen where you have to say, I kind of suck, and that's okay, and I'm with an amazing, empowered woman who's never going to stop getting better, and if I don't admit, here's the thing, you're never going to work on something you don't admit you're bad at. And so to answer your original question, what's it like to be in a growth relationship versus a fixed mindset relationship? In my past relationships, there was one past partner who had playfully referred to me as dating me is like dating a Stairmaster. Now, I'm dialing this down when we're on a podcast. I'm extremely type A driven, massive goals and dreams, a lot of self-belief. I believe in reaching my potential. I believe in human potential, maybe more than anyone on planet Earth. I don't know. I love that everything I do is building toward my potential. And you are doing the same thing. And so I think underneath everything in Emilia and I's relationship, all of it everything we say, think, do, feel, and believe revolves around reaching our potential. and helping others do the same. I mean, if I were to pick one sort of through line of our life, one theme, it would be that. And so anyone who wants to reach their potential loves us and loves being around us and loves listening to our podcast and our content and our social media and connecting with us and going to events, coaching with us. Anyone who is afraid to admit that they're not great, which is necessary for you to reach your potential and to grow, kind of avoids us in a way. It's almost like they want to be around us, but they don't at the same time. And I think a part of them wants to be around us, part of them doesn't. But ultimately, if you're out there, I'm going to talk specifically to the men in a growth-oriented relationship. Most likely, statistically speaking, you struggle with self-doubt and aren't allowed to show it publicly. If that's the case, you have to have inward humility. I think most men have what's called outward humility. I have a past friend I'm thinking of who outwardly everyone thinks he's super humble, but inwardly he thinks he's the man. I was the opposite. Outwardly, I was very confident and very expressive, and I had strong opinions, and I wasn't afraid to debate. I wasn't afraid to speak up for what I believe in and to act on what I believe in. I'm still not. But inwardly, I'm reading the books. I'm taking the courses. I have a therapist. Thanks to you, love. But ultimately, it took humility for me to do that. And you didn't have to leave me in order for me to get a therapist, whereas most men don't get one till after. And most of the people we coach, relationship talks coaching, every time it's the more humble person who brings the less humble person, every single time.
Yeah.
And that's just a fact, because it takes humility to say, hey, I not only don't want to do this alone, because that's just stupid, but I am going to allow myself to temporarily be a student and learn how to be better. And I don't have to always be seen as more than all the time. And so if you are a male out there who struggles with self-belief but pretends you don't, the first step is to own that. Ironically, paradoxically, when you own that you struggle with self-belief, that's when you actually have the humility to start small and actually start building it. And the formula for that, as we've talked about many times, is state, prove, self-assign. But here's the problem, sweetheart. New Year's Eve comes along, and it's not cool when you're out with your buddies to say, I'm going to work out 10 minutes tomorrow. Your buddies are like, whoop-de-doo, bro. And they rip you a new one anytime you show any sign of... But the other guys, I'm going to lift 80 pounds for sets of 10 every day. I'm going to go to the gym for every day. I'm going to change my life January 1st. Right. And it's all just nonsense because no one actually does it. And they all have these strong opinions about football and sports, but yet they're the ones sitting on the couch. And I just can't. I can't do it. And so ultimately, I think that if you are in a growth relationship, you have to take the pros with the cons. The pros are you're going to grow. Your life's going to be better. You're actually going to have a partner who can build a bigger, better, brighter future with you. The cons are you're going to have to get your shit together and actually work on yourself. And if you consider that a pain in the ass, go be with someone who's not growth oriented, and trust me, the cons of that are way worse long term.
What's going on? This is Branden and Hannah. We wanted to give a shout out to Alan and Emilia and their relationship talks. And going into relationship talks, I was under the impression that, my relationship didn't have any conflict or didn't have any problems. It actually was that way, but I knew I wanted a relationship that resembled Alan and Emilia, and that's a relationship that is just next level and different from other relationships. So seeking out their help has really brought me and Hannah together, and it's just been really, really incredible, and I can't thank them enough.
Yeah, Alan and Emilia have both helped us in recognizing and acknowledging each other's really important core values and giving us insight and guidance on how to align those together so that we know we're growing together and never apart. The goal is always to kind of be in everything together as a team.
Alan and Emilia, we love you and thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you.
I want to ask, what are some of those cons? Because what we've experienced as growth-oriented women, it's very easy for, I think, complacency and mediocrity within men to be a very tempting best, meaning seeking that. What are some things, if you could put a thumb on top 3 things that it's actually worse off for growth-oriented men who are like, I don't know, like this is kind of a pain in my ass, right? Like to shift out of the entitlement and arrogance of like, oh, you're always going to be my pain in the ass, to like gratitude and humility. What are 3 things from a fixed mindset relationship that men in relationship with growth-oriented women who might be nudged along really need to understand what the really big downside is if they don't get their shit together?
Well, you have a choice. So if you're a man out there watching or listening to this, you have a choice. I had a choice. I could be with a woman who was not empowered, who didn't believe in herself, who didn't have big goals and dreams, and who just wanted to be complacent. Complacency is a gradual settling to mediocrity. It was easier. I was already enough by default. I was already beyond what they could handle just at a coasting speed. So me at my walking pace for them was an all-out sprint in terms of goals, dreams, development, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, self-work, skill sets, knowledge, awareness. I mean, it just wasn't close. And I'm saying that because I need to be candid about this if it's going to be helpful. Yeah. Even though I'm scared to share that because, oh, go me, right? But ultimately, you have a choice. There are women out there who are much more focused on looking better than getting better. I've been with women in the past who were the best at makeup. They were the best at clothing. They were the best at looking good. Yeah. And we would go to the club and they'd be invited to the VIP section immediately. And I'd be sitting there like, Jesus. All right. But it was easy to be with someone like that because she wasn't that bright. She wasn't driven. And unfortunately, that's what's called a depreciating asset. She is getting, as you get older and older and older, that stuff fades. And I am growing exponentially and becoming an appreciating asset. So you're never going to, imagine you choose a home. Best metaphor I've got. You're going to buy a home, and it's going to be a property that you reinvest in consistently. You're going to renovate the kitchen. You're going to redo the yard. You're going to redo the roof. You're going to put in marble countertops. You're going to make it so much better. You're going to buy it for $500,000. You're going to sell it for $3 million in 10 years. That's what's called an appreciating asset. And the land is going to be more valuable. The home's going to be more valuable. Everything about it's going to be more valuable. That's what a growth-oriented woman is like. A non-growth-oriented woman is going to be easier in the short term, and probably in some cases it might look like a bigger status build because they're much more focused on Instagram filters and maybe plastic surgery or makeup or whatever. And for men, when you're next to a really hot girl, quote unquote, it's a status build for you because most young men that are immature just want a hot girl in a nice car. And so your buddies think you're the man and blah, blah, blah. You need to go for something deeper. You need to go for something better. And hopefully you go for an appreciating asset, because I've been with women in the past where, yeah, they looked good in their early 20s, but they weren't working on themselves. They had bad habits. And I projected into the future and I thought, okay, you're not getting better. You're not getting smarter. You're not learning. You're not humble enough to face any of that. This is going to be worse and worse and worse. And the contrast is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And we already don't get along that well. And other people in my life would say, really? You guys are amazing together. Listen, with all the love in the world, of course, compared to you guys have a terrible relationship. That's like me saying, I'm so pumped my car has 3 tires. I don't settle for low standards. And so this person who said, you guys are great together, I said, no, we're not. Your standard for what great is, we have a better relationship than you and your partner by far, and they were engaged and all this stuff. But that doesn't mean we have a great relationship. Your sample set is broken, in my opinion. I've seen magnificent relationships that get along really well, that are growth-oriented. I know it's possible. And so that's the gift and the curse of knowing what's possible. If you believe in your potential, if you believe in what's possible, you can't settle. And I'm so glad that I didn't. And so for the women out there, please don't settle. For the men out there, please don't settle. There is a bigger, better, brighter future on the other side of humility, courage, and vulnerability, and doing the work. And by the work, we did an episode on this. I mean the inner work and the skills and the attitude and the personal development, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, and the career and your health and fitness. If you're not renovating your house, your future will get worse, not better.
Beautifully said, love.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Beautifully said. Okay. Last micro question, and I know we got to wrap up. Tool. Let's shift into a tool. 1 to 3 tools max that the men who are in a growth relationship where the female is maybe hyper growth oriented, what are some of the tools that they need to make sure that they have in their toolkit or are putting in their toolkit? People, persons, places, things, ideas, systems, etc., that they must consider after this episode of taking action on or making sure that it is a daily thing.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is get around someone who makes you uncomfortable at the ego level. You have to get around someone who is so far ahead of you that it makes you uncomfortable. This can be in the gym, this can be in personal development, this can be in finance, whatever it is. So that's the quickest way to grow. Is I don't think you can lecture people into success. I think you have to get around it and immerse yourself. So that's number 1. Number 2 would be habit tracking, but it has to be based on where you have self-esteem. So I coach 28 people on my roster currently, but I've coached hundreds over the years. I always find out what they tie their self-esteem to. And people say, well, don't tie your worth to your bank account, and don't tie your worth to your partner, and don't tie your worth to your home you live in, and don't tie your worth to your car, and don't tie your worth to what clothes you wear, and don't tie your worth to your hair, and don't tie your worth to your physique, and don't tie your worth to your intelligence. And it's like, listen, in the real world, person off planet, this world, we tether our self-esteem to things that matter to us. It's called core values. So you have to tie your self-esteem to something, and your self-esteem is what powers your dreams. So you're not going to achieve your dreams, and everyone's a shitty partner when they feel bad about themselves. And they're especially a shitty partner when they feel bad about themselves and pretend they feel good about themselves. That's the worst. The person who's deeply insecure pretending to be the man, like, just cut it. So here's how you fix that. Immediately. What you do is you figure out, okay, what makes me feel like shit about myself? It's who you are and what you do when no one's watching that matters. I had someone come to me early in our relationship. I want a relationship like you and Emilia. And I said, I don't mean, I want to say this because I care about you. That's not possible for you right now because you aren't Emilia.
Right.
She has put in so much. She's renovated her house 1,000 times more than you. So you kind of can't have a relationship like we have. And by the way, the 29-year-old version of me could never be with the 29-year-old version of Emilia. I'm 35, about to be 36. You're 29. That works. We're peers. Me at 29 with you at 29, I would be a student every time, all the time. And it would be awesome for a week until I was drowning in my own lack of personal development. I'm being playful, but seriously, that's how it works. You are not capable of attracting someone who's a peer unless you have the facade and the external stuff. So the tool, habit tracking, but it needs to be the top 3 things that you tie to your self-esteem. Be honest with yourself. For Kevin, it's the bank account, it's the car he drives, and it's whether or not he's weight training. For me, I don't feel good about myself unless I'm weight training. It's a thing. I've tried to change it. I've tried to shift it. I've tried to pretend it is. It is. It just is, and I'm not going to change it. And I honestly think there's some empowering truth to certain things about you uncover. You don't necessarily change. They're never going to change. And so why try to change them when you can just improve them? So for me, I tie my self-esteem very deeply to fitness, personal development, meaningful progress, but you need to figure out what you tie your self-esteem to, if you're a man out there watching, and then track it somewhere visibly that you can see it consistently, daily or weekly or bi-weekly or monthly or quarterly or annually. I recommend daily.
And the last thing is, from the self-awareness, self-reflection first question that I had, what is the best tool for that? Obviously, habit tracking helps you to do that, but that's more of a quantitative check mark, whatever. It's not necessarily writing out your thoughts and writing out your emotions. So it's further the enculturation of don't self-reflect from a thought standpoint. Instead, just self-reflect with check marks. What's the best tool for something like that you've used? Sorry to interrupt you.
We have a new tool called the Next Level Dreamliner. It's on Amazon. We can put the link in the show notes. It has a self-reflection question at the top of every page. And the cool part about the Dreamliner is it's got your top 3 gratitudes, top 3 most important tasks, most important win for the day, most important improvement, and then a next level lesson. The reason why the Dreamliner is awesome is not just because it's mine. It's because it's enough. it's enough to where it's worth doing, but it's not so much that you can't sustain it. I can't stand these planners that are too intense to where I can't consistently do it and I just keep falling off. And I can't stand the planners that are completely blank because there's no roadmap whatsoever. It's just free-flowing thoughts, which for a man, that's hard.
Yeah.
I need some structure.
Definitely.
And so Next Level Dreamliner is enough to where you want to do it, but not so much that you spend an hour a day. It takes 10 minutes a day, and it's in the show notes. But ultimately, if not that, you have to basically just ask yourself the right questions. You have to contemplate. You can't live on the surface. There's certain men out there that I call bobbers. They just can't go beneath the surface on anything. They have to talk about the sports team or the car or politics or something stupid and mundane that's really, you can't go into the depths of meaning. And I think life's about meaning, and that's what women want, is a meaningful relationship. I think deep down that's what women really want, is a meaningful relationship. And they want a meaningful man of virtue and of growth. And if they're a growth-oriented, because if not, they want to drive a Lexus and look hot and be on TikTok, right? So, and again, it is what it is. I'm on TikTok too, but at the end of the day, if you have a growth partner, you're going to have to do this work, or you're going to have to go back to old world and get the hot girl, quote unquote, right?
or be left and be wildly lonely and unfulfilled.
Your partner will be the one who got away if you don't do this work.
Yep.
I'm very grateful to know that I don't have any partners who got away.
Yeah.
There was none of that. If I screwed this up with you, you would have been the one who got away, that I was always longing for. I really screwed that up.
Yeah.
I didn't give that my all. And if you're out there watching or listening to this, don't settle. Give it your all, because the point of an intimate relationship, I do believe, is growth. I think that's a very healthy frame of reference.
I agree. Thank you, honey.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. And I, by the way, for the growth-oriented women out there, I also know that growth-oriented women are also super hot. So I didn't mean to do that. I just meant that's not their focus. That we are. You're funny.
Wow.
I was told once when I was Halloween, I had a wig on. I was told by one of my buddies I'd be a really hot girl. So, yeah, he was a dick.
Lovely.
Yeah,
well,
he was probably insecure.
Okay.
And we're moving on.
We're gonna close this episode with that. So if you're a dude out there and you're in a relationship that is growth oriented, and this has brushed some things that are unsettling or putting you in discomfort, that is a good sign. That is a sign for you to lean in and to reach out, because the first tool that Alan suggested was get around someone that makes you feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is where all of the glory is. So reach out to us. We have free relationship talks coaching every single Saturday that we do. That is something that if you're a conscious single or a conscious couple, we would love to have you in there. The focus really is to integrate some of this stuff. Maybe we can have some conversations around where you're struggling to grow. We can apply some of these tools, and we can have you and your partner, if you'd like, jump in there. Those are awesome.
Also, we have a Relationship Talks virtual event that we give every single month. It's the third Thursday of every month.
Correct.
Is that
but
true?
This one's going to be in October, so it's actually going to be Wednesday because it conflicts with my group coaching.
You and I have to talk about that because I have a team huddle on Wednesdays, so we're going to have to work on that.
Okay.
All right, so here's the deal. You can register for the event. The link will be in the show notes, and then if the date changes, you'll get notified with an email.
Yes.
So please register either way. This is event number 40.
Yes.
This is our 40th month in a row.
Yes, the topic is how to be your true self in your relationship. More often than not, people get in a relationship, you're in the infatuation stage. Oh my God, this is your everything. You found your partner. Awesome. Now you start to lose yourself and you start to get totally enmeshed. And what that ends up doing is you sacrifice and put aside a part of you, and then slowly over time you forget who the heck you are, and that causes so many issues in relationships. So this relationship events is all going to be about how to become that true self and to build a bridge back to that person while you're in your relationship.
One of the things that happens is either you come in with a facade or you come in with your true self, but eventually as you start to fall in love, there starts to be more and more at stake. So then you start to shrink and or puff up depending on the situation, and then you stop being your true self because you're playing not to lose instead of playing to win. Whereas in the beginning, there was nothing to lose.
Yeah.
We find that constantly. We have several couples who have parted ways, and it freed them to be themselves again, and then they inevitably want to grow more and sometimes be together.
Yeah.
So we appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening. This was very different for me to sort of sit back, and you were sort of the host. That was cool. And now I'm going to take back the host on the end here.
Take
so
it back,
it's not,
baby.
Yeah. So it's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please make sure you follow us on Instagram. I am at Evolve with Emilia, and Alan is alazarus88.
Also, if you or your partner resonated with this episode, leave us a review at the link in the show notes, and please share this with someone you love and care about.
Until next time, remember, it's not about you or me. It's about
the we.